Very special guest. The specific topic today is testicular mesothelioma, which is a cancer caused by asbestos exposure. Our special guest is a client of the firm who is here to share about his own personal experience around asbestos exposure, his diagnosis of testicular mesothelioma as a result of that exposure, the medical impact it has had on him, as well as his own journey through legal avenues to seek justice through Hodgins and Allen solicitors. It's an extraordinary account, and it is tremendously kind of this individual to come forward today to tell our audiences about what he's been through, what others who have experienced the same can do from a legal perspective, and to shed more light on the subjects at hand: testicular cancer caused by asbestos exposure and other asbestos diseases more generally. So alongside Lorna Webster, partner at Hodgins and Allen solicitors, we are delighted to welcome our special guest, Mr. Roy Siggs. Lorna, Roy, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having us today.
Now, Lorna, before I turn to Roy, could you provide a brief description of your role within Hodgins and Allen solicitors? For instance, the types of cases you deal with, and to also tell our listeners a little bit more about the firm in case they're not aware of what we do.
Yep, so I'm a partner within the Asbestos and Workplace Illness team here at Hodgins and Allen Solicitors, and I've been working here since January 2020. I specialise in asbestos disease cases and have been assisting people affected by asbestos illnesses to bring compensation claims for about 27 years now. And I know Roy as he was one of my previous clients, and we had a successful claim for him. Now, the firm itself was set up in 1977, which is almost 50 years ago now, by Henry Hodge, Peter Jones and Patrick Allen. These three gentlemen were committed to helping individuals who otherwise would not be able to gain access to justice. The firm has grown over the years, and we now have over 250 members of staff, most recently being featured in the Times Best Law Firms 2026 list, which ranks the top 250 law firms in England and Wales. We have a number of teams that assist people with their legal issues, ranging from asbestos diseases, other personal injury or medical negligence claims, criminal defence work, wills and probate, and indeed many other areas of the law that people from all walks of life may need help with. Each area of law that we cover has specialist teams, so all of our clients know they are in experienced hands. Everybody who works at Hodgins and Allen follows a philosophy of helping people gain access to the law, irrelevant of the client's means or background. And this ethos has always been at the forefront of what we do. Personally, I'm very proud to be part of the Hodgins and Allen team.
Thank you so much, Lorna. Now let's turn to our special guest, Roy Siggs, who's joined us today. By way of background, Roy was exposed to asbestos dust with a former employer called Durrant Brothers Limited, who were based in Sussex at the time during the 1950s and into the 1960s. He initially worked as a probationer plumber, then completed a 5-year plumbing apprenticeship, and after that, he stayed with the company working as a qualified plumber for a while. Many decades later, Roy received a diagnosis of testicular mesothelioma, which it was later proven was caused by his previous plumbing employment. Roy, thank you so much for coming forward today to speak about what has happened to you. I know you're keen to share your experience, and I hope it helps others diagnosed with mesothelioma as well. So let's start with talking a bit more about how you got into plumbing and the work you did.
As a youngster, I thought that plumbing would be a good career to get into and would give me a trade for life. I managed to get myself a job as a probationer plumber with Durrant Brothers, which were a local building firm. As a probationer, I had to learn some basic plumbing skills and show I was a hard worker to prove I deserved to be taken on under a formal 5-year plumbing apprenticeship. I went on to complete my normal apprenticeship, then stayed with the company until I was called up to carry out my 2-year national service period in the Royal Air Force. After leaving the Royal Air Force, I returned to Durrant Brothers and stayed with them for 2 more years, continued to work as a qualified plumber. Although I didn't think anything of it at the time, I was exposed to asbestos material throughout my employment with Durrant Brothers.
I understand, Roy, that you were regularly tipping loose asbestos fibres from a bag into a bucket and mixing them with water to create a lagging mixture. And when the lagging was mixed to the correct consistency, You then used your hands to apply it to pipework and boilers for insulation purposes. Was that dusty work?
Yes, the tipping of loose asbestos fibres into a bucket caused lots of asbestos dust to surround me, and I was quite dusty at work. Asbestos fibres like to float, and so the fibres floated around in the air for a long time after the asbestos bags had been emptied. I got covered in the fibres. It was impossible not to. When water was then added to the bucket, the fibres again flew upwards into my face. I never knew at that time that asbestos was dangerous for health and assumed my employers would not be giving me dangerous materials to do my job.
So, Roy, as well as lagging pipework and boilers, how else were you exposed to asbestos in your work?
I had to remove old asbestos guttering and fit and cut new asbestos products using a handsaw and filing and cutting as required. After a job was completed, I had to clear up at the end of the job, which included sweeping up asbestos dust and debris. I also had to cut and fit asbestos sewer pipe using a handsaw, and I regularly used asbestos rope and even carried a roll of asbestos rope in my tool bag. The rope was used to fill in small gaps and edging and was cut off the roll with a knife. I also had a small tin of loose asbestos fibre which was mixed with a little water, moulded using my fingers, and then used to fill in small holes, typically from where holes had been drilled but needed filling to get a smooth surface back. When I look back, my work with asbestos, I am genuinely shocked at how much I used on a regular basis.
Thank you, Roy. Was it just your own work that exposed you to asbestos dust?
My own work definitely exposed me to a lot of asbestos dust, but I regularly worked alongside other tradesmen such as electricians and carpenters, and of course other plumbers who also used asbestos products. I also breathed in the dust they created from their own work.
Thank you, Roy. Now let's turn to Lorna Webster, partner from the Asbestos and Workplace Illness team. Now, Lorna, what kind of protection was provided by Roy's employer to protect him from inhaling asbestos dust?
Roy unfortunately was never provided with any warnings about the dangers of asbestos dust by his employers, and he was never provided with any kind of personal protective equipment to stop him breathing in the asbestos dust. Of course, Roy had no reason to question this and just accepted that his work was of a dusty nature.
If you're joining us just now, we're speaking on the London Legal Podcast as hosted by Hodge Jones and Allen Solicitors. Topic of today is focused around asbestos and workplace illness, specifically testicular mesothelioma. Joining us on this conversation today is Lorna Webster, partner in the Asbestos and Workplace Illness team at HJA, and we're most delighted to have today a client, Mr. Roy Siggs, who's talking about his own experience. And we'll be speaking further about what happened to Roy, how Roy managed to come to Hodge Jones and Allen, and how Lorna Webster was able to successfully put forward a claim on Roy's behalf. Now, if the issues that we're talking about today concern yourself or a loved one, then please do get in touch to find out a bit more information. The number is 0330 822 4953. If you call that, you'll get through to the team, the Asbestos and Workplace Illness team at Hodge Jones and Allen, and we can speak more about your inquiry with you. At the same time, if you'd rather visit the website, you can do so via www.hja.net, and there you can find out more about Lorna Webster and more about the Asbestos and Workplace Illness team here at Hodge Jones and Allen. Before I turn to Roy to talk about his symptoms and how testicular mesothelioma arose, Lorna, could you perhaps provide a bit of context for our listeners who may be completely unaware of the link between testicular mesothelioma and asbestos exposure? Is it quite common, Lorna?
So mesothelioma is a cancer usually caused by asbestos exposure. Mesotheliomas can be found in the lining of various body organs, most commonly the lining of the lungs. However, mesotheliomas are also found in the lining of the abdomen, the lining of the heart, and the lining of the testicles. There are about 2,500 people diagnosed with mesothelioma in the UK every year, but less than 1% of those mesotheliomas are testicular. So therefore, testicular mesothelioma is a very rare type of mesothelioma. Most mesotheliomas will cause typical cancer-type symptoms, including breathing difficulties, unexplained weight loss, and extreme tiredness. However, testicular mesothelioma symptoms usually present as scrotal swelling, discomfort or pain, and as this type of mesothelioma is so rare, it can be difficult to diagnose.
Thank you, Lorna. So let's turn back to you, Roy. So, Roy, how did you cope in the aftermath of the operation and treatment?
It was challenging and tough. I felt tired and fatigued and was uncomfortable riding my bike and walking for any period of time. I love riding my bike and walking, and so it was hard to have to stop those for a while. Although I'm pretty much back to normal now, I remain under regular medical review. Just recently had a swelling in my groin area, and of course it's a huge worry for me and is always in the back of my mind.
Thank you, Roy, for sharing that. So if you're listening today and the issues that we're talking about concern perhaps you or a loved one or someone you may even know, and you'd like to make an inquiry to find out more about your legal options, you can get in touch with Hodge Jones and Allen Solicitors and our Asbestos and Workplace Illness team. The number is 0330 822 4953. Otherwise, you can request a callback and complete an inquiry form on our actual website if you'd rather do that. The website is www.haa.net, and there you are able to input as many details as you like about what happened to you, or arrange a callback with our expert lawyers. So now let's turn to Lorna Webster, partner in our Asbestos and Workplace Illness team. Lorna, how did you first come into contact with Roy, and what was your opinion of what he had gone through?
So after his diagnosis, Roy sought advice from his local asbestos support charity, the London Asbestos Support Awareness Group, known as LASAG. LASAG offers emotional and practical advice to anyone affected by asbestos diseases, and they also encourage people to seek legal advice on entitlement to compensation and DWP benefits. LASAG works with selected law firms who have proven their expertise and knowledge in relation to asbestos-related diseases, and Hodge Jones and Allen are one of those firms. Roy contacted us, and matters went from there.
And just to reiterate this point for our listeners, Lorna, testicular mesothelioma is incredibly rare, isn't it?
Yes, it's very rare indeed. When Roy came to me, I'd been pursuing compensation claims for mesothelioma clients for over 20 years. And whilst, of course, I knew all about testicular mesothelioma, I'd never actually had a testicular mesothelioma client in all that time. Ironically, I'm now acting for another gentleman with testicular mesothelioma who was also exposed to asbestos dust at work many years ago.
So now let's turn to the legal side of things. Lorna, what were your thoughts about the case Roy had against his employer?
I met with Roy and took all the information about his previous employment. It quickly became apparent that he was exposed to a lot of asbestos dust when working for Durrant Brothers Limited. And so a plan was agreed with Roy to pursue a compensation claim against them. Now, the company itself had long ceased trading and so could not be pursued directly, but there are always other legal options in mesothelioma claims in that situation. And a claim was ultimately pursued against the former employers' liability insurers of the company Durrant Brothers Limited. All the relevant evidence was gathered together to support Roy's claim and disclosed to the insurers. An admission of legal blame was received by them, and a settlement was subsequently agreed for Roy. The settlement also included a court order in relation to potential future medical treatment costs, which are not available on the NHS.
So are you saying, Lorna, that if someone has an asbestos disease from their previous employment, and that previous employer is no longer trading, as has happened in Roy's case, that it's still possible to pursue a compensation claim?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. There are other options to be explored if the former employer is no longer trading. For example, if the relevant employer's liability insurers can be identified, a claim can be pursued against those insurers. If mesothelioma has been caused by work exposure and there's no former employer to pursue because they're no longer trading and the relevant insurers cannot be identified, then there's a backup scheme that can be applied to instead. At Hodge Jones and Allen, we know what all the avenues are, and we obviously advise each client individually on their options.
Thank you, Lorna. So can you tell us a bit more about the court order for the potential future medical treatment costs that you obtained in Roy's case?
Of course, when a settlement is achieved for a mesothelioma sufferer, we also seek a court order stating that if any new treatment comes up in the future, which the treating doctor considers would be suitable for that particular person to have, but the treatment is only available privately and is not available on the NHS, then the private cost will be paid for by the insurance company who paid the compensation. The court order will also cover treatment which may only be available on the NHS for a certain period of time, but which the treating doctor considers is still beneficial for someone with mesothelioma to continue after that time has passed. There's absolutely no time limit in these court orders, and so a client can come back to me any time after their claim is settled to get those relevant private treatment costs paid for by the insurers.
Thank you, Lorna. So for our listeners, you're listening to the London Legal Podcast, and whether you're listening to this episode through Spotify or YouTube or coming across it through social media, please do pass the details of the show on to someone it may concern what they're going through, it may concern something their loved one is going through, and they simply may want to find out more information. We're speaking today with one of our clients, Mr. Roy Siggs, and he's come to our episode today of the London Legal Podcast to talk about what has happened to him with regards to testicular mesothelioma. Again, if you do wish to make an inquiry in relation to what's going on with you or a loved one, the number to call is 0330 822 4953, or you can arrange for a callback or input your information via an inquiry form on our website, www.hja.net. So let's return to our conversation with both Lorna and Roy. A question for you both. So there remains a stigma around the testicular health issues and men coming forward to talk about the subject, whether it's talking about their experiences, about the symptoms, the risks, and the need to take action. Roy's willingness to talk about this today will hopefully encourage others to step forward and share their experience so men know they are not suffering alone. My first question is to you, Lorna. What would you say to anybody listening who thinks testicular mesothelioma caused by asbestos exposure is a distant risk?
Testicular mesothelioma is a rare type of asbestos disease, but it is nevertheless still a risk for men who have previously been exposed to asbestos dust. Roy is evidence that the condition does develop. As mentioned earlier, there are about 2,500 people diagnosed with mesothelioma every year, and many of those mesotheliomas will be linked to previous asbestos exposure at work. If we look at just the last 10 years, that's about 25,000 people who have developed mesothelioma, which is a shockingly high number. I would encourage anyone who's been diagnosed with mesothelioma to seek expert advice to find out their legal rights and entitlements. I would also encourage any men suffering from painful or swollen testicles to seek medical advice. No one should ever be embarrassed about where in their body they are suffering from pain or discomfort, and seeking prompt medical advice can make a huge difference in terms of getting an early diagnosis of a condition and therefore having more treatment options available, or being given the all clear and stopping the worry. The reality is, if that Roy had been too embarrassed to seek medical advice about his testicular symptoms, he most likely wouldn't be with us today.
Thank you, Lorna. And Roy, what would you like to say to any male listener who's listening today who may think there's no point in bringing forward a legal claim?
For any man diagnosed with testicular mesothelioma, or any kind of asbestos disease for that matter, I would definitely encourage them to seek legal advice from Lorna. She made the legal process as easy as possible for me, explained things in a way I understood, and not once did she make me feel embarrassed or awkward talking about my medical situation. At the conclusion of the claim, I felt that some justice had been obtained and that someone had taken responsibility for my condition. Lorna clearly knows what she is doing, and I always felt in safe hands. The Asbestos Support charity, LASAG, also gave me a huge amount of support, particularly after the diagnosis. Even now, I continue to keep in contact with LASAG and have found that meeting other mesothelioma sufferers helps us all realise we're not alone.
Thank you very much, Roy. So, Lorna, to summarise the process as briefly as you can, if someone listening to this feels they've contracted mesothelioma as a result of asbestos exposure in their work, and they would like to make an inquiry with you to see whether they have any legal recourse against their employer, how does the process work exactly?
So anyone who's been diagnosed with mesothelioma or another asbestos-related disease should seek legal advice, and they can contact me directly on 0330 818 1135, or else you can visit www.hja.net and get in touch with me and the wider team via our inquiry form or request a call back for a convenient time. There's absolutely nothing to be lost in seeking legal advice, so why not find out your rights? If an asbestos-related claim can be pursued, it's at no financial risk whatsoever to the client in terms of legal costs and expenses. I feel very frustrated thinking there are people out there who have been diagnosed with mesothelioma but who think they cannot pursue a claim, perhaps because their former employer is no longer trading, or they think the exposure was too long ago for anything to be done. They could be missing out on compensation payments and DWP benefits, as well as not getting any justice for what has happened to them.
Thank you. Roy, with Lorna sitting here now, is there anything you'd like to say to her about how she's helped you?
I just want to say a huge thank you to Lorna and her team at Hodge, Jones and Allen. Lorna supported me in a very difficult period of my life and got me the outcome she said she would. At first, I was a little anxious about a solicitor coming to my home to meet with me, but I had absolutely nothing to worry about. Lorna's a very knowledgeable and easy to understand, and it was clear to me from the start that she genuinely cares for her clients and is very good at the work she does. I would also like to extend my thanks to the NHS, who have and continue to look after all my medical needs.
Thanks so much, Roy. Roy, I'd like to thank you for having the courage to speak today on this podcast about what happened to you. You're the first client we've had on the London Legal Podcast, and the topic is particularly important as you've spoken about an issue that is challenging for men to speak about. Hopefully we've been able to remedy that a bit little today with this show. So I hope listeners have found this podcast interesting and informative. If you would like to contact Lorna to discuss your own situation, she can be contacted on 0330 818 1135, or else you can visit www.hca.net and get in touch with her via our inquiry form or request a callback at a convenient time. Thanks again for listening to the London Legal Podcast, and whether you're coming across this show on Spotify, YouTube, or our social media channels, please do pass the link on and you may be able to help a loved one or someone you may know, or even someone else who's listening to this show that doesn't know about the legal options that they have before them. Thanks again for listening, and we'll meet you again for another episode of the London Legal Podcast.